Talkin, Teachin.
Ryan, we really need to get a professional.
Our first guest is History Department Chair and History Teacher Stephanie Portman.
Hello, everyone.
Welcome, Stephanie.
Thank you very much for taking the time to do this today. The format is really casual. We just kind of want to have a conversation. Not all of the questions will be about teaching necessarily, but we kind of want to get to know you in the classroom and get to know you outside the classroom at the same time.
Sounds good.
So the question I always like to start off with is, nobody really grows up thinking that they want to be a teacher. Was there anything in your youth, maybe participation in activities or your personality, the way that you were, that would suggest that you might eventually become a teacher?
Yeah, I did a lot of babysitting growing up. That's how I made money. And then every summer I would be a camp counselor. So I was always around kids.
What kind of camp?
It was a Jewish day camp. And then I went to spend the night camp in North Carolina where
cool.
I was a camper for 5 years and then came back in college and was a counselor. And I just always liked being around young people. Mm-hmm. And so that was cool. And then I loved history. So I actually did want to be a teacher pretty young. I came in as an undergrad and got my BA in history and then also got my teaching credential.
So you knew when you were an undergraduate, you had inclination.
Yes, I did. I thought I wanted to go to law school, but then decided not to and thought, you know what, I really want to teach. I love it.
So we're here with Sophie Chen too. Sophie's a senior. We have a student representative. My name, by the way, is Ryan Holland, and I teach science at OES. And also am a participant in the OES Stories activity. Sophie, do you have a question for Steph?
I have many questions. We'll start with one at a time.
All right.
Who's your favorite teacher that you've had in your lifetime?
Favorite and most inspirational can be two different things, I think. So my most inspirational teacher was a guy named Robert Spahn. He was my 10th grade Western Studies teacher and European History, AP European History teacher as a senior. And he was so smart. It was a pretty traditional school. There was a lot of lecturing, but I was just super impressed that he could just spout off all kinds of history, never had notes in front of him, never had anything to remind him. So he was brilliant. He was also incredibly hard as a teacher and had super high expectations. And in some ways, I think when you're a student in that kind of class, that very intense environment, you can either crumble or rise to the occasion. And so he was really divisive in the school. Some people loved him and some people really hated him and thought he was super intimidating. And he just made me rise to the occasion. And it's funny because over the years, I would Google his name to see what had ever happened to him and I couldn't find him. And then I donated some money to my high school and did it in his honor, and they were able to track him down.
Wow.
And he lives in Colorado, and he's in his mid-70s, and he wrote me a note. And he and I got in touch via email, and I said, I became a history teacher inspired by you.
Wow.
And I think that's one of the craziest things about being a teacher is you never know the impact you're going to have on someone. Years later, they might come back and say, I studied history or I went into this job or this nonprofit because of your class. And it was fun to talk to him about history and the teaching of history over the years. And I think it made him feel really good to think, gosh, all these years later, I graduated from high school a long time ago, a year before
I'd
you.
give anything for that to happen to me.
Yeah, and with a handwritten letter. And so it's been kind of a lovely connection that we've had.
So Steph, that brings up another question that I would have is, OES is similar. There are teachers that are more polarizing than others. But the main point I want to bring up is that there's not one way.
Right. Absolutely.
There's many ways to impact kids' lives, to make the subject material come alive. What is it about your personality in the classroom and your teaching style that you think works for kids?
I really try to get to know individual kids and really reach out and know what they're about outside of class as well as in. And even after I'm done teaching with them, I will check in. How's violin going? What's going on over here? Are you doing theater? and try and continue that relationship with them and honor who they are as people. I think if a student feels seen and known, it makes them feel good. Everybody wants to be seen and known. So that's how I try to connect. I also want students to be engaged with the world. Like a lot of, I'm really passionate about social justice and engagement and larger issues. And I think if students continue on that path and realize, oh, I read this article, or last night I went and saw former National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster. And some students came with me, and it was really cool to hear someone out in the community saying a lot of things that I was saying in class or reaffirming it. And they looked to me and they're like, oh, we talked about that in class. And
cool.
so those are good things when kids can see the relevance of what they're learning and be valued as just people in the world.
Yeah.
I think I was in your class for what, semester?
Yeah.
And I
8th grade.
Yeah, back 4 years ago. Can you believe that? Yeah. And I feel like I still have a personal relationship with you, even though, that was so long ago.
In fact, when we were talking about what, I think you brought up Steph as our first guest on the podcast.
Yeah.
So you haven't had her for a while, but.
Right, but we'll spend some time if we're doing like the open house for the history department, or I'll run into you, think about something, or just ask how you are as a person. And I that's why I appreciate being with kids, and it's been kind of fun because your senior class, I came in at 8th grade, so to see them grow up to be seniors now, exactly, prove yourself. Yes,
like the goodwill that builds up over time.
Right, and I tend to be an introvert. It's hard for me to get to know new people, so understanding who colleagues are and how to navigate a new culture and the politics of a school, it took a little time. I still feel, because I wasn't at a pre-K through 12 school, it's a little odd to still not know people's names after 5 years being here. But it is nice to have some siblings come around and feel like the families know me by now and have that part of the community.
And now you have a child who is in the
first grade.
First grade.
I brought her.
Yeah, so that's, you have them going through, then you get to know the parents of that class especially well.
Right.
I'd like to take it back a little bit further. You're from Atlanta, correct?
Savannah. Yes, Savannah, Georgia.
Were you born and raised?
Born and raised. My dad was born and raised, all his siblings.
So what kind of work did your dad and mom do in Savannah?
So my dad's an attorney, still practices a little bit, and my mom never really worked. And growing up in Savannah, actually all I wanted to do was get out.
Because I feel like that's pretty common. Wherever you grow up, there's this urge around the age of 18. Yeah. Just, spread your wings.
Right. Unless you grow up maybe in a place like Portland. But I think it's really healthy to go live somewhere else, to try something else.
But, we're from the West Coast. I'm from the West Coast. And I've lived in different parts of the country. Yeah. But I've never lived really in the deep South.
Right.
To somebody who's on the West Coast, a Californian, an Oregonian, what's it like being from Savannah?
Yeah. So this is a story I like to tell. So I went to a private school in Savannah. All my friends' parents were professionals, doctors, accountants, lawyers, whatever it was upper middle class. And I'm Jewish, and my best friend was biracial. His mom was African American, dad is white. And our friends, who were very bright, came from bright, educated families. Their parents belonged to a country club where no Jewish people could be members and no African Americans could become members.
Wow. And this was in
the 80s. And so, we often associate that with like hillbillies and rednecks. Like they don't know any better, not well-educated society.
If you don't mind me butting in here, but I got into an argument the other day with a student who made some broad generalization about the state of Alabama and incest. Yeah. And it really irked me because I actually have lived in Virginia and I was born in Alabama. My father was in the military, but then I actually started watching this documentary on Hulu the other night about hillbillies. Right. And so it's actually an issue that's kind of, for some reason it gets me charged up. Yeah. That we can still make fun of and stereotype poor white Southern people. Right. And is that stereotype, do you feel like it's warranted in some ways? Or is it always bad to stereotype?
Well, I think you can have well-educated people who still want to put Confederate flags on their trucks too. You know, like it's more complicated. I think the way racism is in the South is it's just much more overt. I don't think that it's a particularly people in the South are more racist than anywhere else in this country. They're just more comfortable showing it. And I think in other areas it's like hush hush, but it's still the same sentiment. You know, every state has its stereotypes. I wrote my college essay. I did a summer program in Boston in high school. And when people found out I was from Savannah, they were asking me like the most ridiculous questions, like, "Oh, are you in like a single schoolhouse?" And like I was some country bumpkin somewhere. Yeah, I was like, "What do you even know?" They couldn't identify it on a map. And you know, we've had graduates who have been Rhodes Scholars. I mean, there is an academic, intellectual community there. But it's a really mixed bag. I felt pretty suffocated by the very traditional elements, the whole like debutante thing that my friends went through, and it was a big deal when my friend Lolly, who was like the first Irish Catholic to be a debutante, because normally they didn't even accept Catholics.
Only WASPs.
Right. I think the greatest change for Savannah has been the opening of this art school that came around like in the 70s, and it's grown a lot, Savannah College of Art and Design. So it's brought in a lot of interesting people. And I think new people are coming down to the South. When I go back there, I can appreciate it to a certain extent, but it's like the humidity in the air. I still feel really
to that weather?
Suffocated.
Oh, you feel suffocated?
Yes, I feel suffocated. I just
wondered if it brought back, you know, fond memories.
Yeah. I think I appreciate, like, all my dad's family is there. So I come in and it's like big family events, and I'm the only one that's out here. And so it's different, but I can appreciate it for what it is, but I just feel like I think it would be hard to be a liberal person in Savannah. There's room for it in small doses, but when you think about your state legislator, you know, your senators, it's a really hard time for my personal life to be made like a political statement of acceptance or not.
In order to solve problems, I feel like there has to be some coming together of the sides.
Yes.
How can that happen? Do you have any idea? I mean, do you talk about it in your class at all? Or?
I mean, it's my family. My parents are huge Trump supporters.
Same.
And I'm not. And it doesn't mean that they're good people or I'm a good person and vice versa. It's hard because in this day and age, everything is political. Like you cannot open the news and see any title of any modern article or current event without there being a political tinge to it, of right and wrong or good or bad.
So how do we overcome that?
I know, we try to focus a lot on my daughter and find commonalities of things that we can share and appreciate. I mean,
because there's love.
Right, there's love, there's an appreciation of nature. We'll go on walks, we'll go like on boat rides. We try to do things that we can share together, have a beer together, laugh about things.
But you don't get into arguments with your parents, or do you?
Oh, I do. And then we step back because it's really hard. You know, they want to convince me, I want to convince them. We're not going to convince each other.
Right.
My dad bombards me with articles. I've said, please stop forwarding me these things. And he just wants to do it. And so last night when I saw McMaster, he's at the Hoover Institute, which is a conservative think tank. He's like
I actually worked at the Hoover Institute.
Did you really?
In college.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
He's a big military guy, and I thought, okay, he's conservative, he's big in the military, like I'm ready to hear what he has to say.
Yeah.
And he said something related to this was, how can Americans have respect abroad if we don't have self-respect at home? And we don't respect this country right now in the way that we treat each other in the Constitution. And he was saying, like, we have to come together as a country in order to, like, really, if we want the values of America, liberal democracy and freedom, to really be supported abroad, we want a stable world, we have to be a role model. And we are not a role model right now.
No.
But I think they couldn't understand some of the things I was going through. So through literature, I was always rooting for the underdog. I was always, drawn to the underdog because I felt like the outsider, like there's something that's so, like being an outsider among a majority where it can be really hard. And none of my friends were experiencing that. Like all my friends were, upper class, white Protestant that was my group of friends who I love dearly, but they just didn't understand. And so my empathy for the underdog, I think, really shaped my interest in social justice and empathy for people around the world who feel like they either don't belong or don't have power, feel like they don't have agency in determining all kinds of things. So I think that really shaped my choices. And much of my politics are geared more towards social issues than, let's say, foreign policy or economic issues. And I think on some level, my parents love me and accept me and came to my wedding and love my wife and all of that. So on some level, they are more moderate in the social spectrum, but when it comes to like economics and foreign policy, they're much more right. So our differences are different in the sense, you know what I'm saying?
It seems like, maybe it's, you both have similar values at the very core of things, right? And once it becomes abstracted towards things that don't really relate to you as much, then it's harder
I feel
to
like
agree.
like common ground is about finding common values.
Right.
And we all have common values, especially in your family.
Right.
I have the same dynamic with both of my siblings, who is just like, I feel like we came from different planets. But then I went to visit my sister last Christmas, and just over time, you just become much more forgiving. At least that's, I can't say that I agree with my parents or with my siblings, but it's okay to agree to disagree.
Yeah. It's hard when it's like you can't have a candidate and parse out and say, I like this person's economic plan, I like how they handle foreign policy, and I'm just going to ignore all the social stuff, you know? And we each have different priorities, so you have to look at the full package. So the other thing is they watch Fox News constantly.
My grandparents addicted to Fox News.
It's
everything.
Like
their Bible.
Well.
Right, and it's their online news source. It's constantly on in their house. So that just exacerbates this like riled up nature of it all, where I don't feel like I'm even as riled up.
But do you feel like that's your perspective from the left, looking at a member of the other side?
Right.
What are they seeing in you and your media consumption?
My dad thinks I only look at liberal publications. He thinks it's all very narrow, that it's pretty naive, not understanding. I mean, when he watched the Democratic debates last night, and he's like, who's going to pay for these things?
Right, life is supposed to be hard.
Right.
No one should just get anything handed to them.
Exactly.
That kind of stuff.
I mean, the socialist message of just like, they just don't know what they're talking about. They're all wacky over there, and it was more for like entertainment value than to actually pull out any like kernels of truth.
So what's your go-to source for a broader perspective?
Well, I spend a lot of time on the New York Times. I do look at BBC. I will look at the Washington Post. I mean, they would all say that those are like main. I look at the Guardian. I mean, but I do.
Wall Street Journal?
Wall Street Journal. I don't go to Breitbart. I do look at Donald Trump's tweet. I don't follow him, but I go straight to the source to see what he's saying.
That's probably one of the most extreme ways you can broaden your experience of reading.
And I read the comments below, and it's like, who knows what's real? Who knows what's a Russian bot or whatever? But in that way, like, how are people responding to him? When it's just that free space.
Regarding common ground, and this may be the last question, or we can wind it up. One area is the arts, where I think people can find common ground, and particularly music.
Right.
What kind of music did you listen to growing up, and what's your go-to karaoke song now?
That's so funny. I knew music was going to be brought in because it's you. Growing up, we listened to a lot of classic rock. Classic rock. My dad listened to a lot of what's Margaritaville? Jimmy Buffett and the Eagles.
Have you ever been to a Jimmy Buffett concert?
I have been to a Jimmy Buffett in Hilton Head, South Carolina.
Was that crazy?
There were a lot of parrot heads.
Parrot heads.
Yes, singing along to the hits. He's like, yacht rock. My dad likes, yacht rock. I was a DJ in college, so yes, WNUR. So I listened to a lot of like way out there music that would now be considered like Indian alternative. But that was like one of the best things I did in college, for fantastic. Sure.
If I had to do it over again, I definitely would have been pursuing sort of the radio or something in college other than, the silliness that I
It was a fun outlet.
And then what about your go-to karaoke song now?
My one is Jesse's Girl.
Jesse's Girl, Rick Springfield.
Yep.
Well, Stephanie, this has been fantastic. I think this is kind of exactly what I was hoping to hear from teachers, their perspective, their passion, their intelligence, their commitment. So thank you very much for being the first interviewee on our podcast.
Yeah.
Stay tuned for another episode with a different teacher. Subscribe to OES Stories.
Guys.